Okay, so today I'm going to do something a little different. I'm doing one of my recorded sort of sessions, so what do I mean by that? Like a recording session, like I'm an artist or a musician. No, it means like sometimes I'll sit down for like an hour when I'm not streaming, but I'll record on OBS or whatever, like an hour session of me sitting there and going through these different takes I have over the years on different subjects. And it'll be like different things that I write in my notes on my phone, but I won't really write like a whole script for it. It'll just be like, okay, there's this take I had from years ago, and I should really make a video about it, like the bubble take from the Lakers winning the supposed Mickey Mouse ring, right? So one day I would have put in my notes, like, this is something I've discussed before, but I should probably make like a formal clip out of it. So then I put a note in my phone, and then I put like a little tag next to it, like, to let me know, like, so I can search for it. They all have that next to them, like something, make a clip out of this effectively. So I have like a little note there. So then I go through a list of all those. So then I sit there and I'll say, like, let me give an example of that. People consider the 2020 bubble ring of the Lakers to be a Mickey Mouse ring and to sort of be fake and illegitimate, right? But that's completely inconsistent, because the problem is, no matter who you pick to win that, they all played in the bubble. They all knew they were playing in the bubble. So it didn't benefit one team. It benefited every team. So, for example, I picked the Clippers to win. So if they had won, would you discredit them and say, oh, they only won because of the bubble? Or if the Bucks won? So no matter who won then, it would have been a Mickey Mouse illegitimate ring. So if you say that, then that's fine, right? Then, okay, no matter who won, it was irrelevant. But then doesn't that make it a level playing field? Like, so it's meaningless that the Lakers won, but it would have been meaningless no matter who won, because they were all in the bubble, not just the Lakers, right? So an equalizing factor that applies to everybody. And then the other part of it is the fact of, like, it arguably even hurt higher seeded teams like the Lakers. We saw that with the Bucks. Like, the Bucks got upset by the Heat, and the Heat made it all the way to the finals as an underdog, even though they did that a different year too, outside of the bubble, so they're just good like that. But what it means is it arguably hurt the higher seeded teams because they didn't have home court advantage in the same way that they normally would have, right? So that would be the way to explain it, that it applied to everybody, so it should be a fair equalizing factor. It hurt the higher seeded teams, which the Lakers were. So it really comes off as just people hating on the Lakers because of how much attention they get and whatever. But realistically, it didn't benefit them specifically, right? It would have benefited everybody or hurt everybody the same way. So yeah, that's just like an example. And I do have a clip of that exact discussion on my channel somewhat recently that I put. So the point is that this is kind of how it would go. Maybe the audio quality of this isn't the best, and we have the little Hearthstone thing on the bottom that I maybe didn't mean to have here, but it's like I could go through now, and there's a whole bunch of things on Yu-Gi-Oh! Lately that I've been thinking about, so let me do a bunch of stuff on this. And I did do like a whole analysis reaction on Yu-Gi-Oh! Recently too, but let me try to... Basically what this does is it makes them more in like short form, hot take type things that can be clipped. So then I'll take that hour recorded session and I'll make like a bunch of clips out of it, which I might do with this, but it seems like, based on the audio quality alone, it might not be worth it. So one of the major problems with so I've seen the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, seasons 1 through 5, obviously with the Pharaoh and, obviously the original one. So, and I've seen like maybe 1 or 2 of the movies, but I haven't seen like a lot of the newer stuff. I haven't seen any of the other shows like GX and stuff, right? So the thing is, it's a show that I'm almost embarrassed to say that I enjoy, but there are aspects of it at least that I do enjoy. The problem is that it's a show that fails on a certain game theory level of it keeps the audience in the dark, because it's not about whether people try to sort of defend it, right? It doesn't follow a consistent rule set. Like Duelist Kingdom is different than Battle City and it's different than other parts of the show, right? Not only is that true, but it doesn't follow the real life card game, which you would think, since that's what it's about, right, in a tie-in, you could say, oh, it doesn't have to follow that, but you would think that would be a helpful or nice tie-in to do. You're making a show about a card game, but you can't even follow the rules of the actual card game, or you can't even follow consistent rules within the show itself. So it's, again, it keeps the audience in the dark. It doesn't matter what the rules are, but you need you need to at least have the audience have something to follow. Because otherwise it's arbitrary plot armor nonsense, like, oh, whatever they need to do, they'll just do. And let's look at the layers of plot armor that happen, right? One layer of plot armor is you just draw the right card you need at the right time, right? Like, and the Pharaoh even has that kind of ruins the show. It's kind of like the midichlorians thing in Star Wars, two of the worst writing moments in fiction history that ruin those subject matters. It's supposed to be like, oh, the Force is this magical thing, and if you work hard enough, it can be like this rags to riches type, anybody can be powerful and successful, like Luke, this straggler, this scavenger type guy, right, who seems like a nobody. Oh, he can rise to prominence if he works hard enough. And like there's a sense of that, even though he does have the lineage that we find out later. It's like the midichlorian thing ruins it, because it's like you would know from the beginning immediately then everything, what your potential is, what it isn't, right? So you could just do a midichlorian test on the Emperor or on the Chancellor at that point, and you would know he's a threat. He could be a Sith because he has a high midichlorian count. So it takes away all the mystery and the majesty of that and kind of ruins the whole story, because then it's so obvious. Like, okay, we would know from the beginning that Anakin has this potential. We would know from the beginning that Luke has that potential. So, right, and the same thing here is that, like, oh, destiny draws. So the whole story, the Pharaoh is cheating. So Kaiba only loses to cheaters. Kaiba's the best duelist, just like Edgeworth is the best lawyer in the Phoenix Wright series. Like, when does Edgeworth lose? When his client is actually guilty, right? It's like, oh, Phoenix beats Edgeworth with the help of spirit channeling and a bunch of other BS. But he also has something else on his side. He has the plot on his side. Not so much plot armor, but, like, the truth. Like, Red White really is guilty. So Edgeworth has to do the impossible and, protect a guilty witness, basically. Or, again, D. Vasquez, he even helps you win that one, right? He helps Phoenix. And then he also helps you take down Damon Gant. He also helps you, like, the second game shows that he could have easily won that case in the Mad on Guard situation, right? But he helps you there as well. He helps you kind of, well, I guess you kind of, it's weird because, like, okay, he really is guilty, but then he delays getting him found guilty when he could have done it earlier just to drag things out so he can save Maya and whatnot. So, again, it's like the skill versus the circumstance. It's not that Edgeworth isn't great, it's that his clients are always guilty. So, or I mean, the defendants are always innocent for Phoenix. So how is that fair? Does that really mean that Phoenix is a better lawyer, or does it just mean that the truth is on their side? So the layers of plot armor with Yu-Gi-Oh are like, okay, you'll draw whatever you need when you need it, especially with, the Pharaoh destiny draw. Like, he has that, he can control what he draws with his will almost, but which is cheating on top of the fact that there's two people in one. So you're doing two people at once. They have magical powers. They have the destiny draw thing. But, so again, that kind of ruins the story the way the midichlorians ruin Star Wars, because, oh, so it's all just preconceived. So, in other words, he could have drawn, that's why Weevil kind of is the hero of the story. He destroys Exodia or throws it off the boat. Otherwise, he would have been drawing that every single game, because that's how he cheats. Like, he would have been Destiny drawing that. So rather than making it something like, oh, Heart of the Cards, and we just believe, it's like, no, he literally is controlling it, right, with his magic, with his will, however Ishizu explains it. That's taking it like one step too far. We're like, oh, he's just straight up cheating then. Which, of course, everybody in the show kind of does. But no, the layers of plot armor would be one of them, just like drawing what you need when you need it. Kaiba even says something to that effect, but at least he's not a cheater. He doesn't have a Millennium item. you could say he has history and destiny on his side somewhat, but I almost give Kaiba the full credit. Like, Kaiba's the best duelist because he doesn't have two people in one, like Yugi and the Pharaoh, who at the end we see are both so good. Right, like they're both, Kaiba gives him credit, he is the king of games, but they're both really good, and so it's kind of like you have two really good duelists in one. So could either of them have beaten Kaiba 1v1? And without the Destiny Draw, cheating, BS. Like, think about Kaiba's record, right? I'm basically extolling the virtue of Kaiba the way I would Edward, too, the same way as, like, Kaiba is the best duelist in the show. He doesn't have a Millennium item or any magic, right? He has some history in Egypt, but so what? Like, he doesn't have the Millennium Rod. He doesn't even believe it. So he doesn't have those things to benefit him. He doesn't have a second person inside of him helping him, right? Like Yugi. He doesn't have the Millennium Eye. So who does he actually lose to? He loses to the BS of the Destiny Draw, Exodia, Cheater, and Yugi, the Pharaoh. He loses to Pegasus, who's cheating in multiple ways. Not only is he using the Millennium Eye, but he's also using the Toon World and, like, exclusive cards that only he has, right, as the creator of the game. Then he also loses to, like, he was going to lose to Ishizu, but then, he gets saved by the Millennium Rod inadvertently, but it's kind of like, good, so he cheats there, kind of, he gets help, right? But he's playing against a cheater who can see the future, so it's kind of like, so he finally gets help to counter a cheater and survives. And then he loses to Noah, but he doesn't really, because Noah's about to lose, and then he hides behind Mokuba. Like, everybody cheats against him. Even he loses to Yugi in the Battle City. Again, he's always cheating. Yugi's cheating in a way that we just accept, right? He's cheating. And then not only 2 versus 1, and I love what they do in the English, which is supposedly not done in the Japanese. I can't remember, but like where you hear Yugi's voice when he's thinking, but you hear the Pharaoh's voice when he's talking. Whereas in the Japanese, I think it's like, it's like, whatever. It's a situation where Yugi, whatever, like, he always loses only to cheaters, right? So Pegasus cheats by using the Eye and certain exclusive cards. Noah cheats by hiding behind Mokuba and using a deck master kind of BS that he invented. And then Darts really isn't cheating. I guess he kind of cheats with the Mirror Knights. I wouldn't even say, like, Darts' cards are too powerful, because, like, that's not even relevant. Like, you're defined by your deck. Like, that's part of how a duelist is considered. So, like, Kaiba has his blue eyes and whatnot, so that's fine. But Darts is dueling a 2v1 versus Yugi and Kaiba, which easily makes him the best duelist in the whole show, because I guess the implication is, well, it's only the Pharaoh by himself. But still, like, what other villain could do that? Merrick can't beat them one-on-one, right? Can't beat the Pharaoh 1v1, but Darts can almost beat him with Kaiba there, too. Right, that's insane. So yeah, Kaiba, I'll give Darts almost a pass, though. He's almost not cheating. And the only cheating is, like, he hides behind the Mirror Knights that look like Yugi and Pegasus and Mai and stuff. Joey, right? So that kind of stops the Pharaoh from attacking a couple times where he otherwise would have. And then Kaiba beats Siegfried. The point is, he's about to beat all of these people, and then they cheat, right? He's about to beat Noah. He beats Gozaboro. He's about to beat, he would have beaten Pegasus. He beats Pegasus, like, in the movie and stuff, when Pegasus doesn't have the eye. So, we don't know whether he would have beaten Bakura or not. So the thing with the Pegasus Eye thing is one thing I can clown, right? He can see what's in your opponent's hand at that time, but at that point it doesn't matter, right? It's too late. It's like, oh, sure, I can see what's in your hand, which is useful, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't mean that I can counter what you're going to do because, okay, what if I don't have the right card to counter in my deck? Then it won't matter what I see in your hand. Or what if I don't have the right card in my hand at that time to counter what you're doing? So it really doesn't matter because it's a situation where it's just stupid because you would still need the right card. So that whole seeing the other person's hand isn't as impactful as you might think. It doesn't just magically, oh, I have to have the right card in my deck to counter it. I have to have the right card in my hand to counter it, and then I can see it, and then I can counter it. And a lot of the plays he makes are things he could have done anyway. It's like, oh, I have this face-down card, and now I trigger it, and I know what you have in your hand. But it doesn't matter because, you can use a trap card anyway. So you have the trap card down, they play a card, and then he counters it. It's like, oh, I saw it in your hand. But even if you didn't see it in their hand, you're playing that trap card like that anyway, right, in a reactive sense. So, but yeah, it keeps the audience in the dark. The rule set is really messed up. Like, it's not consistent. It's not even clearly defined. Like, I'll give you a good example. Good writing is like in the Battle City arc where they establish the rules themselves, like to the audience. They tell you, okay, you have to tribute for monsters, etc., right? They lay it out like Kaiba's Battle City rules. And also, the God cards are a good example. Even though they're plot type things, they are real cards. They almost work like that in real life, except for Ra getting way too many abilities. But basically, Obelisk and Slifer are actually really good for the show for this reason. They're kind of seen as overpowered cards, but Obelisk has 4,000 attack. You can sacrifice the 2 monsters, which that's a big question too. Like, the Pharaoh could have done that with the other 2 God cards that turn, whatever, that he summons them and beaten Yugi that way. But the point is, they're at least clearly defined. Obelisk has 4,000 attack defense. Obelisk, has all kind of other powers. Basically just the spell trap immunity directly, and also the 2 sacrifice thing. So at least it's clearly defined for us for the audience. So now we know what we're getting into, right? So then it's not as much plot armor BS as later on in the show, like the Waking the Dragons arc. Even though that's a great arc, the dragons themselves kind of ruin it because their powers are undefined. They're just pure plot armor BS, right? They can just do whatever they want whenever they want. Oh, they can fuse with monsters, they can fuse with traps, like they can do whatever they want. And it's not clearly defined because those are like new things that we're seeing every time, right? Like, oh, it fuses with the Queen's Knight to make Goddess Bow or something. Like, we've never seen that before. We don't know that. So the audience is in the dark and it's just plot armor. Whereas with Obelisk or Slifer, we know how they work, and they work consistently, and they have a clear rule set. Slifer's attack being the number of cards in your hand. The second mount thing, which ends up being the biggest weakness that causes not only Merrick to lose that duel, but also the Pharaoh to lose the duel in the end. Right, so Slifer's the ultimate liability. And then it's a situation where but yeah, getting back to the layers of the plot armor, like, again, drawing the card you need when you need it, but then the next layer is kind of like having the cards in your deck, right? So, like, the characters will have certain cards in their deck that they never have at any other time in the show, right? They'll use it only once, and in a duel where they happen to need it, and they'll draw it at the right time. So the problem with that is, like, it'll be a card that they never use. It's one thing if it's something we consistently see. Okay, they happen to use it here, and it happens to be useful. The problem is that it'll be a card that we've never seen before, we never see again, we only see in that duel, and it's specifically perfect for that situation, like Berserker Soul, right? That's so perfect for that situation. Not only, I love that. It's plot armor to a different degree, right? Destiny draw to a different degree. It's not that you're drawing the card that you need. It's that you're manifesting a card into existence that we've never seen before, never see again, for that situation. That's perfect for that situation, not only to win the duel, but to even do something further. He's Destiny drawing, right, to try to BM Weevil and punish Weevil, right, to overkill him, basically. So that's funny on two counts. He's drawing all these monster cards that allow him to do that. But number two is, even having that card is like, gee, I sure wish, this could almost be a line from Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged, but I don't think it's in there. Like, gee, I sure wish, I'm sure glad that I got the card, the one card that would allow me to overkill my opponent and BM them in a situation where I want to, because any other card wouldn't let you do that, right? Berserker Soul is perfect for that situation from a plot standpoint of the Pharaoh trying to torture Weevil. So he's getting plot armor in a different way. Right, plot armor to BM, not to just win. Right, it's the perfect card for that situation in which you can overkill your opponent by constantly drawing monsters. Any other situation, you wouldn't be able to do that. Oh, you would just attack once and kill them, and they're done. You wouldn't be allowed to attack again and again. So he gets the perfect card not just to win, but to BM. And the thing, this is a pure BM play too, is Kaiba, Yugi versus Kaiba when he does the diffusion wave motion thing. And he says, you know, he doesn't need to do that. He could attack one of the blue eyes with his Dark Paladin and he would win. But he attacks all three with diffusion wave motion just to purely BM him. Right, he didn't need to do that. So, and then what's even the further layer of plot armor is, again, not only drawing the card that you need when you need it, but having the card in your deck when you often don't even know, right, having a card in your deck that's convenient for that situation, but when you don't even know your opponent or what they're going to have in their deck because they're constantly surprised. It's like Kaiba doesn't know that Gozabura is going to have Exodia Necros, but yet he has Soul Demolition in his deck, right? He made the deck before he knew what Gozabura was going to do, and he's constantly surprised even when he's seeing Exodia Necros. So the point is, he had a card that we never see him use, I don't think, any other time. He uses like Dimension Fusion and Soul Release. You would have rather just had him have Soul Release if that works on your opponent's cards, which I'm pretty sure it does. Right, it's like, it's a card he never uses before or after, but yet it's convenient. Though, oh, I had this card in my deck that I didn't know that I never use normally, never used before, never use again, and didn't know was going to be useful in this duel because I didn't know who I was even going to go against, but yet I conveniently had it in there for this duel, right? He didn't know what Gozabura was going to use, or other duels are like that, like, I don't know, like the Light Force Sword versus the Rare Hunter, or even the Chain Destruction. It's like, he didn't know he was going to go against an Exodia deck, but that's the perfect thing to use in that situation, right, where he's able to destroy the other copies of it. So that's a different level of plot armor. Not just drawing what you need when you need it, but having a deck that has the perfect cards in it for a matchup that you don't even know you're going to have, right? The characters often don't even know what their opponent is going to have in their deck, but yet they have the perfect counters for it anyway. Which, right, that's really BS, because they're just walking around the city. They don't even know that they're going to duel anybody sometimes. And then, oh, they get kidnapped or something happens. And then, oh, but they had the perfect card for that situation all along. Or even like, again, it's just not something signature to them that we've never seen it before, never seen it again. And then what else? Like, just the fact that, like, these are supposedly experts at duel monsters, but they don't even know what half the cards in the game do. They're constantly surprised by them. They're constantly explaining them. Half the show is just exposition of the cards or the character's motives in a very bold-faced, blatant way, which is typical of children stuff. Like, it'll be the characters explaining their motivations very clearly, but, right, just a lot of exposition, heavy-handed stuff. But, yeah, the problem with the show, again, it leaves the audience in the dark, and I could kind of clown it on this basis, right? It's a show that is about a game, so I'll clown it on 2 counts. It's a show about a game in which it features the game, which I can compare that to other things. Like, okay, we can do a pitch, right? Pokemon is this card game or these video games, and we can make a show about it in which, the cards come to life and they're real Pokemon. That seems really cool. That's a good pitch. So you take something that's just a game that people play, they play with the cards, whatever, figures, and now we can bring it to life and have them be real Pokemon running around. That's a cool idea. What's the pitch for Yu-Gi-Oh? It's this game that's a card game that we're going to make a show about, in which the show consists of the characters using cards. So you're taking a card game and turning it into a show about a card game where they physically play the card game, right? So imagine how stupid of an idea that is. They're not playing something, again, shadow games and all the stuff, they toy with the idea of it and the holograms and stuff, but the reality is that it doesn't matter, because it's still like you're making a show that's about a card game, and it's about the card game. It doesn't bring that stuff to life. Like season 5 is almost more like what it should have been like, and even though that has its flaws, it's like, you're failing on 2 counts, right? It's too direct. You can say, they're just trying to sell cards and commercializing, but again, at least Pokemon separates it from that. They're not using cards in the show. They're using real Pokemon. Whereas here, again, they're just a show about a card game that is literally about the card game. Characters playing the card game, not anything else. So, right, that's too direct. There's not enough nuance. It's really one of the stupidest ideas. You can imagine that being pitched like, hey, let's make a show about this card game, but what is it actually about? The character's walking around playing that same card game as if you could do in real life. And then the second problem with it is the fact that they can't even follow a consistent set of rules with that card game, or follow the real life rules and how they, ultimately came to be, right? And that's a big flaw, because it's like you're making a show about a game, but you can't even follow the rules of that game properly, whether the ones you set and are not consistent with in the show itself, or whether the ones that you have in real life that, again, come about later, but it would all be consistent is the point. Right, like I would say the same, Queen's Gambit or something. It's about chess, so imagine you don't follow the rules of chess exactly. Right, it's just kind of dumb, because you have one job, right? You're making a show about a game, but you cannot even follow that game's rules properly or portray it correctly. And then what else do we have here? Like, just the fact that Yugi's always cheating too, because again, 2 heads are better than 1. You're doing a 2v1, and they're both great duelists, as we see in the end. And obviously the whole Destiny draw Millennium item type thing too. So, right, so now I'd go through, I'm making this mostly just about the Yu-Gi-Oh thing. I'd go through like my notes where I said this. So, yeah, I would say Kaiba's the best duelist, because he doesn't have that BS plot armor type stuff the way the other characters do, and that's basically all he loses to. Right, he basically beats all the arc villains. He would beat Pegasus, but Pegasus is blatantly cheating. He would beat Noah and Gozaburo, which he does beat Gozaburo, but he would beat Noah, but Noah cheats and hides behind Mokuba and stuff. Nobody would beat Darts, because Darts is just a god, but and then he maybe would have beaten Bakura, but that's one flaw. Even though Bakura is a great villain, and I always praise him for being like this long game villain that, like Schneisel from Code Geass, who has a plan the whole time and whatever. The problem is that he doesn't win enough duels against meaningful opponents. He should have beaten somebody like Kaiba, or like Joey, or like some of the major, I guess Joey or Kaiba are the only two that try to establish great villains. Right, that, if they've beaten them, then they must be good. Like the way that I clown Merrick, that, Merrick doesn't beat anybody. He doesn't beat Kaiba. He doesn't even really beat Joey. So he's trash as a duelist. Like, let's look at Merrick's dueling record, the worst duelist in the whole show. He duels against Yugi when he has Slifer, and Yugi doesn't have a God card, and he loses. Right, so he has a God card, his opponent doesn't, and he loses. Then he duels against, he causes Odeon to lose when Odeon's about to beat Joey. He wants to show off the Winged Dragon, if you want to count that. And then, like, the Winged Dragon of Ra is like a curse almost in a way. Then Mai takes the Winged Dragon of Ra and could just tear it up or set it to the side and not play it, and she would have won. Or she could have even tried to play it but failed, and she still would have won. But no, it has to be this BS plot armor that saves Merrick. Like, it has to be an ancient Egyptian chant, which no other card works this way. And not only does that chant mean that Mai can't summon it, but it means that Merrick can summon it and take over it and, like, gain control of it. So, like, that's the most BS plot armor thing ever. So he literally lost to Mai, if not for pure BS plot armor. Then he loses to Joey, legitimately loses to Joey. Like, his strategy was to try to make Joey pass out because he couldn't beat him. Normally, he would have lost. So he summons Gearfried and then passes out. Like, so Joey legitimately beats him, again, without a God card. So those are two instances of, like, again, you would have lost to Mai if not for the BS around Ra that not only that makes her not able to play Ra, but also makes you able to steal it from her, like using the chant. And then Joey also is the same thing, where you're losing to Joey, you're gonna lose, but then you expect him to pass out. Like what other point in the show would you get away with that? Like, where your strategy isn't to just beat the opponent, it's to say, even though he has some life points left, we're gonna try to just make him pass out and lose without actually beating him in the game, right? You don't get to do that. So, again, you lose to Joey, who doesn't have a God card. You lose to Mai, who doesn't have a God card. Right, you lose to, obviously, the Pharaoh at the end. But it's just trash because, right, Joey legitimately beats him. And, again, Mai with the plot armor, like the way they're building up Ra is so troll. So Merrick relies on Ra and can't stop talking about how busted Ra is, but then obviously sucks because, again, Mai takes Ra, and then it's over. And then you get saved by plot armor. And, again, the Joey thing is the same way. That, even the Bakura duel, it's a little bit like that, where Ra is going to be, somehow, even the other Merrick doesn't know certain of his powers, and he's BSing with all the infinite powers that he has. And then even the other time, again, Joey, he loses to Joey, even though he has a God card, and evidently the best God card, when Joey doesn't have a God card, doesn't have a Millennium item, anything like that, and yet Joey still wins. Like, how? Right, that makes Merrick look like absolute garbage. Like, who does he beat in a good, legitimate way? Right, he has him shook there. Joey has Merrick shook, so it's really unbelievable. Then there's one funny thing in the darts when he does that Infinity +1 that I said before, like, where it wasn't even necessary to do the Infinity +1 because in that situation, they both have like a deck master basically where the Divine Serpent is, if it gets destroyed, Darts loses, and if the Dark Magician Girl gets destroyed, Yugi loses. So he does the whole infinite attack thing, and that's enough. Because then the Knights could have just traded in, and then the Knights could have just traded in, and even though they would have been destroyed, Yugi doesn't lose because the Dark Magician Girl is still there, and darts does lose because the Divine Serpent's gone. So, right, you didn't need the +1 BS. But no, there's a moment of that always cracks me up when he says, he's going through the thing of the infinite attack points, and Heremos gets to triple the attack points, but I have to sacrifice my 3 Magnet Warriors. And it's like, he doesn't have the Magnet Warriors in his hand, right, or on the field. So he just randomly gets to show, this has some cost to it, at least to do this. Where did those 3 Magnet Warriors come from? Just randomly from his deck? And what does that have to do with anything? But that line cracks me up so much. But first, I have to sacrifice my 3 Magnet Warriors. From where? Where the fuck did that come from? They're nowhere to be found. They're not on the field. They're not in his hand. They're just randomly. Okay, why do you have to sacrifice 3 random minions from your deck? Yeah, basically what I would do with this is then I would cut it up and into little clips, which is probably going to be ruined, and I shouldn't be doing it like this because the audio of this just isn't very good, but whatever. I don't really care that much. But yeah, maybe I should start doing them like this because I don't care, but those tend to get more views too on on YouTube if I do it as a clip. Not that, again, I really care about that either, but I was doing that for a while, posting different clips from those recorded sessions. You have to kind of dumb everything down right in a certain way. Or yeah, speaking of his defeat to Merrick, that's the worst delivered line in the whole show, where in the English, where Joey says, "I summon Gearfried, the Iron Knight." He yells it, even though he's about to pass out, against Merrick. He says that way too loudly and enthusiastically. And what else could I think of here? It's basically if the Pharaoh / Yugi ever did lose a shadow game or something, it's it could have been the same thing with the Seal of Orichalcos. One of them would have survived it, and the other one could have gotten taken away. Right, they could have always maybe used that to escape. But one thing I'll praise about the show is the way they use that double identity thing is actually really clever. First of all, the way they introduced it at the beginning is nobody really knows what's going on, and so it's kind of just a weird thing, and then it's explained later. But it's kind of the way they use it against Pegasus by doing the mind shuffle to throw Pegasus off is really creative. It's something that just happens to be part of the story, but they thematically use it very well. Numerous points in the show, right? So they use it against Pegasus. The mind shuffle, they use it against... There's a moment against Noah where Noah tries to steal Yugi's body and then he can't because either he's already, just because it's the Pharaoh or because of the puzzle or because of the Yugi connection. And then with obviously the Seal of Orichalcos, this is one of those plot armor type things, but it actually makes sense because there are 2 of them, so it makes sense that they'd be able to do that. So even in season 4, right when the Pharaoh's about to have his soul taken, Yugi steps in, that actually kind of makes sense, right? It's not just purely plot art. Because it's one of those things, you don't expect Yugi to lose, and then he does, and you're shocked, and it's how is he going to get out of this? But it actually kind of makes sense, right? That's at least good writing, because, I don't know, it's just one of those things that happens to be the premise, that there's 2 of them, and they can switch back and forth, but it's used to great effect throughout the show. And, of course, even the finale, right? The fact that then they end up dueling each other, which is a bit of a cock to Kaiba, that he should have felt he gets that chance, but or here, yeah, this is one of the stupidest things, is the fact of the characters in Yu-Gi-Oh! Won't know what the card is a lot of the time, or what it does, even, its effects, right? These are supposed to be experts on the game, but they don't even know how half the cards in the game work, and they have to constantly ask and be surprised by them. But they'll somehow know the attack name, right? So, like, the Pharaoh doesn't know what Exodia is. Like, when in the first episode, this card is useless, and he's kind of wondering and remembering back to Grandpa. So this should almost be an abridged moment where, oh, and by the way, Yugi, his attack is called Obliterate, or you have to tell him to obliterate when you tell him to attack, right? Like, so when the Pharaoh says Exodia, obliterate, how does he know that? Or like when they say the attack names. So they don't know what the card is, but they know what the attack name is. Like, even Taya does that, or other people do that. They'll say what the name of the attack is, but how do they know that? Right? They don't even know half the time what the card is or what it does, but yet they know this very specific attack name of it. He's telling Exodia to obliterate when 5 minutes ago he didn't know what Exodia was, right? And he's remembering vaguely his grandpa. So I want to see that as a flashback. By the way, when you tell him to attack, tell him to obliterate Yugi, like his grandpa saying that. But no, some of the filler is actually quite good. The Noah's Ark is good. I just think the timing of it is really bad. That it shouldn't have been in the middle of Battle City. It could have been before altogether or after. Maybe on the way back. Not to put a damper in it, but it's weird, right? Like, it's midway through, so that would have been the part that people dislike. Or even the darts. I don't even consider that filler, really, because it's so long and such a big deal, but darts is really the final big bad duel boss of the show, because Bakura isn't such a great duelist. But yeah, and the puzzle is a good form of plot armor too. Like, even what we see in this very image, right? You can say, oh, it's plot armor, BS, but it's a good thing because at least it's established. Like, why couldn't somebody just kill Yugi or, right, physically attack him? That's why, because the puzzle would protect him in that situation. So, right, it stops panic from burning him or whatever. And that's when Taya decided the Pharaoh is really, really hot when she sees him survive getting burned alive, and nobody like reacts to that adequately enough. So the thing is that it's a very flawed show. The one thing I say is the greatest strength is the characters. They're actually very interesting and well defined, especially, again, some of the villains. Darts is really good. Kaiba is interesting. Some of the character interactions and dynamics are really good, but right, it's almost something you're embarrassed to like, but like, give Gansley a shout out. Gansley is the founder of the Big Five, and he duels the Pharaoh, and he actually beats the Pharaoh. He could summon that. He even says that, like Rainbow Snake and Ghana or something a turn earlier, and he says, oh, but that wouldn't be any fun. So he actually beats the Pharaoh. You could say, oh, the Deckmaster thing threw him off and stuff, but it doesn't matter. Like, he legitimately beats him in a duel. So, like, Gansley is amazing. And his whole, like, style of business talk and how he's kind of laying everything out is so interesting. Right, so Gansley is kind of underrated. He legitimately beats the Pharaoh. He doesn't really cheat. I mean, aside from the Deckmaster inconvenience of picking Karibo, which I don't think he was even behind that. It seemed like an accident, or it could be somebody else hacking it, or Noah doing it or something, but it seemed to just happen on his own. And then he has a really good strategy, well thought out. He personifies his character. And he's also, like, again, the Deckmaster lack of familiarity, but all the characters have to deal with that, so I don't know, that duel is one of my favorites in the whole series, because Gansley actually feels very threatening, very sharp. But yeah, some of the plot armor cards that I could criticize are, again, Winged Dragon of Ra gets way too much attention, too many abilities, and then the Season 4 dragons compared to the God cards is a good example, because like the other two God cards, at least, like Obelisk and Slifer, at least they're clearly defined how they work, and so it makes sense, right? Like, it makes sense. They have a clear defined criteria, the 4,000 attack, the number of cards in your hand, etc., etc. So, whereas the Waking the Dragons is undefined, like, they just kind of do whatever they need to in the moment. And that's even, like, one thing funny about how the fusions and stuff work. Fusions that we accept in real life are like, oh, Yugi will fuse the Summoned Skull and the Red Eyes Black Dragon, or, like, they'll just fuse stuff kind of organically in the moment, and it'll be like, oh, that's a fusion that we, like, just made on the spot. We invented it, is almost how they treat it, right? Like something that's never been seen before, like they're coming up with it on the spot. But in real life, those become cards, but nothing else does. So it seems like, they're like plot reactive cards. It's not that, oh, there's a bunch of fusions that just happen to exist with things that make sense. It's that, oh, like these specific ones are there because the main characters in the show happen to use them. That's why they're fusions, right? It's sort of hard to explain. Like in the show, they act like, again, they're just inventing it on the spot. We just fuse these two monsters together and we make a new one. So it implies that you could do that with almost anything, but not in real life. Only the show gets to do that. So, yeah, the problem is the fact that there's just a lot of inconsistency issues, even with the rules. Weevil is kind of a hero, though, that he did a service to the plot by throwing away that Exodia, because then we would have seen plot armor all the more. There's a lot of dumb moments in the show, too, that are, like, strategic things, like, oh, haha, you fell into my trap by attacking. So what's the alternative to that? Oh, just don't attack? Just sit there and don't attack? Or, like, even Duelist Kingdom Season 1 is stupid because, oh, you can't attack directly. So you could have 5 monsters on the field. They have 1. And so what's the point? Like, you destroy it, but then you can't attack them directly. So then they can just keep putting down 1 monster every turn and just waiting. Again, the characters don't know what the cards do half the time, even though they're supposed to be experts in all this. They don't know what some of the cards even are. The whole Pegasus thing is dumb with, like, predicting the eye and stuff. That, you would still need the right card to deal with it. Again, they don't know the opponent's deck going into a duel, or even that they're going to duel that person. And even they don't know what half the cards in their opponent's deck do, but they still have the convenient card to deal with that situation. And it's often a card that's made up, doesn't even really exist. We never see it before, we never see it again. Like, I could rate the duels and make a tier list based on the plot armor. Right, the degree of how much plot armor BS plays into it. But, and then it goes both ways, too, because, like, Merrick plans to lose, but wins because of plot armor. It's not just the heroes that get it. Right. Against Joey, he plans to basically lose. Yeah, here's one thing I'll actually kind of defend, though, is when people look at, like, that Mammoth Graveyard play by Yugi, where he fuses it with the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, right? You could say that's plot armor, but ultimately, what could be the real-life equivalent? Instead of doing that, just use Hammer Shot, just use Smash and Ground, just use whatever, right? So you could just do that, Magic Cylinder, Mirror Force. So that would just be more boring. So it's a way to make, like, kind of a exciting play instead of a... right, to beat this boss monster instead of just basic boring removal. Right, so in a way, that's just them trying to make it more exciting. Not that you couldn't have just dealt with that some other way. But yeah, that's one of the dumbest and most confusing rules of the whole show, too, is you can't attack directly in Duelist Kingdoms, and then what's the point? You could just have a 40 monster deck like some of these characters even do. Like Joey just has a bunch of monsters and you just stall it out. But, Kaiba and Joey's styles are actually similar too. They just want like strong monsters, but Kaibas are just better, like Force Raider instead of Axe Raider or whatever. Right, that's how they stack their decks up. There's a couple times too where there's probably missed lethals in the show, especially they do things for the plot or they attack the wrong thing. Big Shield Gardna, definitely. There's a few that I feel like I instinctively have said that, like, oh, if they just attacked the Big Shield Gardna with something weaker, and then they could have killed him, right, and taken Yugi's life points, because it switches to attack mode. So there's kind of, a lot of things just for drama, a lot of mistakes. There's one funny moment in the Raphael duel, the second one, against Yugi, where he throws away Monster Reborn into the graveyard, and like the Pharaoh's like shocked. He's like looking at, and the camera zooms in, and he's looking at it like 3 times. Like, he's shocked. This clown just threw away Monster Reborn. Like, that's the funniest shit ever. Like, he discards 1 card to activate a card effect, and it's Monster Reborn, and then the Pharaoh looks at it, and then it zooms in on it, and then it looks at it again, and it's like he just can't believe that he just threw away Monster Reborn. Again, even Ishizu's power is similar to that with the Pegasus, where it's like, oh, you can see the future, but it doesn't matter if you can see the future because you would still need the right card. Right. What if, again, Ishizu being able to see the future doesn't guarantee she's going to draw her cards in the right way? Like, what if she just didn't draw what she needed? So I would say, like, the Yu-Gi-Oh card game, at least in the early mid days, is better than the show, because the show is at least consistent. Or I could make like a compilation edit type thing. What would it have been like if people didn't cheat? Right. How would deals have ended without any cheating? Or you can make all this kind of lore for cards, like, because there's so many normal monsters early on. Right, normal effects that sort of turn into effects that you can just make your own. There's an interesting analysis too, like with the Pharaoh's voice, like why Dan Green's so authoritative, but it's kind of like he's the Pharaoh and he's like commanding his troops, and the real monsters in the shadow games of the past, like that's kind of what it harkens back to. So it's not just him playing a card game. To him, it's something more, which psychologically has a good, it's like the Pharaoh commanding the troops. It's not just he's playing a card game. That's why it makes sense that he'd be willing to kill Kaiba off the roof by attacking, or that he'd be willing to play the Seal of Orichalcos, because to him it's not a game. It's almost triggering some sort of PTSD from his past self, like where it's not just a game. If you lose, and most of the time in the show even it's like that, it's not just a game. If you lose, you go to the Shadow Realm, or you lose, you die, or something, happens. Your soul gets taken. So to him, in that sense, it's not a game. That's why his voice is so authoritative. That's why he's willing to do those extreme things. Whereas Yugi is willing to lose to Rebecca. He's willing to lose to Raphael. He's willing to lose his soul, even, like, he doesn't care even as much. It's also a good advertisement for the cards, because the way he says them is so epic, like, right, that it really sticks with you. And yeah, like, it's just the whole trope that I keep talking about, like being surprised but also prepared, right? You use a card for the first time that you've never used before, and you beat an opponent with it that you didn't know you were going to face, that it conveniently is able to, work towards. Right, you didn't know who you were going to face or what they had in their deck. So Merrick is the ultimate degenerate plot armor farmer, right, that I will just shit all over for sucking at the game because I just don't respect that. He loses basically to everybody. Very bad duelist. I mean, maybe the Bakura one is the only one that feels sort of legitimate. Even that, there's, like, because everybody's always, like, stealing the Winged Dragon of Ra, or... Right, so the best thing to do then is just don't play it, and then he'll probably lose. But yeah, it's like the show had one rule, that it was supposed to follow the game. It's a show about a game, and it can't even follow the rules of the game properly or have, like, consistent rules. Or that's a funny clip idea I had, was like when the dude Mako is dueling Yugi in Duelist Kingdom, then he attacks the moon and that causes the tides to go under. That'd be like, don't show this to Bill O'Reilly. That's Yu-Gi-Oh! Is teaching Bill O'Reilly how the tides work. Right, because it's a situation where he's very perplexed by that. Yeah, it's insane how many characters in the show cheat even within its established rules of, like, to imply that nobody could win if they didn't cheat. You could use that Kaiba Corp channel thing, like where he says, as president of Kaiba Corp, I declare this invalid for every single time somebody cheats. Right, and then he would win every duel, or everybody would have a different outcome. That's always the red flag of plot armor, is like they'll have like an oddly specific card that works for that exact situation, and it's like, you know, it just is too much because, and again, it's not a card they typically use, it's not a card that they'll ever use again, so it just ends up being really, really dumb. But yeah, from the show's standpoint, right, the God cards were good, except for Ra, I guess was too much. The God cards were good because they were clearly defined with how they worked, even though they're powerful. Whereas the Dragon cards were bad from season 4 because they're unclear. They kind of do whatever they need in the moment, right? They're too convenient. They just work in random ways, right, as pure plot armor. And then, you know, Raphael pretty much has infinite aura, the way that he just kind of not only he beats the Pharaoh, he really feels like he could have beaten him the second time too, but he kind of deliberately just gives up at the end. He has literal aura around him, like the wings and stuff that keep whatever. Even Yugi and the Pharaoh sense the aura, like this guy has some special power, or he has something about him, right? The way they present him. And there must be missed wins with like the big shield Gardna, like I always say. Yeah, Raphael is one of those really, really awesome characters that's like an iconic moment that you would have never expected. That is really daring. And again, just clowning the show once again for these characters are supposedly experts in the game, but they don't know what any of the cards do, or they're constantly surprised by them. Yeah, Bakura is a little bit underwhelming as a duelist. He needed like some big win against somebody, but Merrick is even more underwhelming. Even with Slifer, he loses to Yugi, who doesn't have a God card. He loses to Joey, even though he has Ra, and Joey has no God card either. He loses to Mai, but gets saved by BS plot armor with the convenient summon condition. If Mai, or even Bakura, I feel like just don't try to play Ra. And don't, because then by playing it, then you get it in the graveyard, or you give him a chance to summon it. So twice he needs pure plot armor to win. Right, he's relying on Joey to pass out. Mai has to actually play the card and have that stupid rule save him. So it's a situation where obviously it's just really, really dumb. Because it shouldn't come down to that either. Where nobody knows how something works, and then they lose because of that. Yeah, even like the premise of the show becomes comical. Like there's a few contradictions with like the guys are playing in the cave. The grandpa and Professor Hawkins and stuff are playing Yu-Gi-Oh in the cave, but Pegasus isn't that old, or the game couldn't have been invented yet by then. But also, it's like it's based on ancient Egyptians, whatever, tablets and stuff. But then how do we get to all this XYZ synchro nonsense? What do those have to do with it? Right, like where did those come from if it's based on the ancient Egypt stuff? You're telling me they had this in ancient hieroglyphs of like, whatever, all these machines and crazy technology and stuff. But no, season 5 is almost what the whole show should have been like, and I know I'm not even saying I'm the biggest fan of his actual presentation, but like the fact that it's real, right? They're real monsters, everything's there. It's very, very different than just the holograms and nonsense throughout the show. And Kaiba's like torturing people with the virtual reality stuff where like it somehow hurts them, or I don't know exactly how they explain that, but like it's supposed to be a big deal that like, oh, they actually feel like they're getting hit or something. Right, it makes sense again in a shadow game context, or even in the Orichalcos thing, but other than that, it kind of doesn't make sense. But no, as an overall villain, I would call Bakura a great villain because of his long game that he that he is planning everything from the beginning. He's kind of hanging around in the background, so he's very nice. I would definitely clown Merrick, though, for being a... Like, really, if I was to rank the villains, Darts is really good because, again, he only duels the one time, but it's very impressive as a 2v1. You could say his cards are busted, but that ends up being the case anyway, like with everybody. Right, like, Merrick can't shut up about how busted Ra is, or, whatever, just... Pegasus has busted cards, like, all the villains have busted cards. Or that's the thing you could say with Bakura almost, is like, it's the game within the game. He's playing a bigger game the whole show, that he doesn't care about the duels as much. Sure, if he beats the Pharaoh, he would have won earlier, but, right, he's playing a bigger game, so it's almost like the duels don't matter to him, and he's after something bigger. Right, his side is on the big picture, so while, he could say that while you were busy with your little card tournaments, right, he was planning something that was going to rule the world, destroy the world. But no, I'm sure I could find miswin moments. There's a lot of dumb times where they don't use Monster Reborn on the God cards when it feels like they easily could have. Right, make a list of all the BM moments, like the diffusion wave motion thing. But yeah, I like that trope of the characters who don't know what the card is, don't know what the card does, but they know the attack name. Right, like Shining Nova attack, or like whatever, the attack name of something. It just feels like a premise that should be encouraging to people, both encouraging and discouraging. If you can make a show about a card game that consists of them actually just playing the card game and not even following consistent rules and like just being exposition heavy and sort of arbitrary like that, you're trying to tell me you couldn't write a story, or like, this is really, for that show to even exist or to be that successful is shocking. Like, you're taking a card game and you're translating it to the screen, and that's all it is. They're just playing the card game, even if, and then they can't even follow the rules and stuff properly in doing that. Right, like you have one job and you can't even do that. And that's one weird thing about season 4 is like the characters always pretty much top deck the seal, or like draw it in their opening hand, the seal of Orichalcos, so they can play it right away. Like, that would have been awkward for Rex. Rex tries to force Joey to deal, and he draws his opening hand, presumably, and then he plays the seal to sort of force him, but what if he didn't draw it? Or that means he's just cheating. Yeah, like when it comes to the Battle City thing, like you take your opponent's rarest card, but what if you want something different, right? You want something not as rare, but it just fits better with your deck or something. One thing animation-wise, which I don't know if this is just for 4Kids, I feel like it's not always, but the way that the monsters die is pretty unsatisfactory. A lot of the time it looks like holograms, even if it's not. Right, you need more drama, you need more... Make it a little more violent, or like looking like a real monster dying instead of, again, just a hologram kind of going away. some of the card names are very dumb, like Curse of Dragon. That sounds like a spell, or it doesn't sound like a monster. Curse of Dragon. And even like Alligator Sword. Oh, so it must be a sword that looks like an alligator. Right, there's some that sound almost like they could be lost in translation, or they're just a little weird. Yeah, like all these characters trying to farm aura and like be all cool when they're doing nothing more than playing a card game, right, is a bit of an oxymoron. Some of the histrionics are hilarious, like the way they play the cards, or do like these over the top movements and stuff. And then something I said, like in real life Yu-Gi-Oh! Is like the archetypes ruin the game, where it makes it kind of too stiff and too. It's one thing if you have the general framework, but it became too sort of stringent. And this is also another trope. Like, does Kaiba win every single duel ever with the blue eyes? Because it almost feels like it. If you think about, he presumably beats Grandpa with the blue eyes, but then Grandpa doesn't mention it to Yugi that, oh, by the way, he has the other blue eyes. Or he beats Joey with the blue eyes in Duelist Kingdom. He beats Ishizu with the blue eyes. He beats a couple of people with Obelisk. So maybe Kaiba only wins with either Obelisk or blue eyes. He doesn't win with anything else ever, right? I think that's actually true. 100% of Kaiba's wins are with the blue eyes only. Right, which again, I don't mind that, but Yugi's wins are at least a little more diverse. And so he's the biggest victim of cheating too, Kaiba is. And like Blue Eyes is basically made for season 1 because it's with no tribute, then obviously it's just too strong. Right, which that itself is a broken format of not needing tributes. I'm sure there's also a lot of mislethals with the deck masters that I'd have to go through and like rewatch the show. Right, that the deck masters would have been able to come to the field and just kill somebody. Or that is kind of a format I did in the past, where like I tried to simulate a Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime duel tournament, right, with the duels that a lot of characters use, but then you won't have plot armor in real life, so then you'll have to see for yourself how those actually go, right? Right, it'd be very different without that. But yeah, like Bakura's one step ahead of everybody the whole show. He's kind of playing the bigger game. He puts his part of himself in the puzzle piece. Merrick thinks Bakura doesn't know about like the power that you get through the god cards, but actually Bakura knows something bigger. And, nobody knows who Bakura really is, so that's the most badass line ever, and it's in the English dub even. It's said, like, a little bit better maybe than the Japanese is. Merrick says, prepare to enter the darkness at the hands of Ra, and then Bakura says, don't you realize I am the darkness? And he really wasn't lying. But yeah, there's so much cheating that goes on. There's so much BS that goes on. It's really... And again, some of the cheating you can say is part of the plot. Like, okay, Mai is trying to cheat with the... Mai is trying to cheat with the perfume, and then Pegasus is cheating with the eye, and then... I don't know. Bandit Keith cheats in some way, too. There's a couple of funny tropes of, like, the dark magicians giving people PTSD, like Pegasus and Noah both say the same thing, and even Kaiba reacts like that probably, but like, not him. Or, this is a really funny way of putting it, Yu-Gi-Oh! Had 20 years to try to explain how Bandit Keith lost to the kid Sam when Pegasus writes him the note and switches out, and they make this Garnecia Elephantis card, which still doesn't make sense. Or that's the one he's fighting against, but it still doesn't make sense exactly the way they show it. They had 20 years to try to make that win make sense. And even the text of the card, you can look at, it's like, oh, if it deals damage to them and sticks around till the next turn, then you win. But that's not even what happened, because the Garnecia Elephantis is still stronger, and I don't know, it's still not consistent with the way they present it, so they couldn't even figure out their own nonsense of how they supposedly won with that. And yeah, you could look at the villains in Yu-Gi-Oh! Almost like they're lonely and they just want to play a card game. And they find creative ways to threaten and force people to play with them if they don't want to. Right, you could make a whole skit about this, like, oh, I just want to play a card game. No, sorry, I'm busy. Oh, no, if you don't play this card game, I'm going to tie your legs to this and you'll drown, or you'll have this saw chop them off, or something that these people come up with. Right, they just want to play a card game. But yeah, the season 1 is wild in the sense that, no tributes, there's so many weird things, like, and so it makes it pointless. Like, why even have cards that aren't just, even like Kaiba, you would wonder, why do you have cards that aren't really strong? Right, they'll sort of start the deals like that. We'll still play like Celtic Guardian and this and that. Why would anybody have Celtic Guardian if you don't even need a tribute? Why not have higher star monsters? Or that's one of the trope lines, is like, you can't, I just did. Right, they'll say, you can't do that. And then they'll just respond like that, I just did. Or like it makes you think that sometimes the characters are even acting. They'll act all shocked, like oh no, but then they were prepared for it anyway. Like so, they're just playing dumb and pretending, I guess. Right, there's a noteworthy moment where the Pharaoh basically trolls Kaiba like that. Like, oh no, you took Slifer, and then he takes it back. And like, imagine having to censor that too. Like, it's a show about a card game for kids. So on one hand, why should you have to censor it? But on the other hand, how can you really complain about them censoring it? Because clearly it is for kids. So like, yeah, Merrick, once again, all troll. You know, he can't stop bragging about how strong his god card is, but then he still loses. He starts with the handicap of 2 god cards. You know, he has the Rod, he has Bakura's Help, he loses to everybody. Joey withstood both Ra and the mind control that he was doing. Is just a total clown. Like, Merrick is garbage. And he's also one of those annoying villains that, like, insists upon himself a little bit, where it feels like he's trying too hard and he's always laughing and stuff. And like Kaiba had a moment where he should have been the best. Like he had Obelisk and Yugi didn't have Slifer. Right, so at that point he could have tried to force him to duel, and then he'd have a good chance. The same way that Vegeta in DBZ could have like killed everybody when Goku's in bed. He's bedridden, and Vegeta's about to beat Cell. Then he could have just ruled the world himself, or Trunks was close enough to his strength where he could have stopped him. But that's an interesting time where they could have actually sort of won and just done whatever they wanted. So again, as soon as Kaiba has Obelisk and Yugi doesn't have a god card, right, there's no way that he shouldn't have been able to beat him finally. But some of those Monster Reborn interactions are really dumb because you can use it on the god card, so I don't really understand. Yeah, that's what I hate the most. Is like certain cards that feel like they're made up just for a certain situation. They, again, they're too convenient. They're too perfect for that situation. Versus some that, again, like some of the best wins are ones that feel organic. Like, okay, Yugi uses Defusion on the Blue Eyes and then beats Noah. That's like a real play you could actually make. Or even if it has to originate from a cheat with Card of Sanctity or like Card of Demise, the way that Kaiba has. But right, you thought Pot of Greed was busted, but it's a situation where like even Defusion against Kaiba's Blue Eyes Ultimate, like those type of plays are at least legal that you can do. Or it's like the ultimate test or ultimate tool of conflict resolution. If you have a real fight in real life or like any situation, you have a business ordeal, you know, Gozaburo having an issue, or you're having any kind of issue in life, a breakup, this and that, you always solve it with a card game, right? Teia's out on a date with the Pharaoh, and this guy's harassing them, so they play a card game, right? It's the ultimate conflict resolution tool in that universe. The Deckmaster concept was pretty interesting, that you almost want to see that in some video game or something that could be a whole format. But yeah, if you look at kind of the old school thing, a lot of the things in the show, again, they're not instructive, they don't make sense. I could do like a whole sins countdown of like all the sins in Yu-Gi-Oh! Right, like rewatch the show and clown it. Half of the dialogue is, again, just exposing what the cards do or being shocked, and then the other half is them breaking the rules and cheating. Slifer obviously is the ultimate liability, where he ends up costing obviously the Pharaoh the game and also Merrick the game. But here's one analogy between like Yugi, or between Joey and Light Yagami, that you never thought you'd hear them compared, is like, I have this expression, like, I love people who prove me wrong. So like when Joey goes from being a clown basically to beating Merrick, right, that really wins me over. Or like when Light goes from getting clowned by L in episode 2 to doing everything he does throughout the show, and killing Naomi Mizura and stuff, right, he really wins me over there. So yeah, it's like card games are the ultimate way of life there. It's an analogy for everything, where, like, again, a parental dispute with Yozaburo and Kaiba, it's like, no matter what, that ends up being the same thing. I would definitely say his blue eyes is overused, though. Like I said, every single duel Kaiba wins, it's with the blue eyes. Right, I'm pretty positive that's true. Because you would remember it. If he won with something other than the blue eyes, then what would it be? Right, whereas with Yugi, again, he wins a Dark Magician or something here and there, but it's not like one thing. Or like the dual robot that Kaiba practices against could have beaten him, because it summons the 3 blue eyes onto the field and doesn't attack, and then it fuses them. Or like when Kaiba says a couple dumb things in the movies, like, or like his behavior in the movie doesn't match with, in the show he says, Yugi is the king of games, I can see now I was wrong, but then he tries to chase after the Pharaoh and summon the Pharaoh. Right. Or like, even if you say, oh, Kaiba's looking for a way to beat the God cards, well, you should have just watched the Yu-Gi-Oh! Finale. You don't need the Pyramid of Light, you just need these stupid mechs and the gears, the gadgets and the whatever magnet force thing, right? And Yugi's able to beat them that way. So you should just learn from that. Right, he shows you how you can beat the God cards, that way that Kaiba was kind of so at a loss for it. But yeah, Gansley is kind of underrated because he had beaten the Pharaoh and he just toys around and then loses because of that. So there's a lot of times where you should have lost, would have lost. And speaking of the virtual arc, we do owe it quite a bit because it gave a dueling sort of identity for Taya, Tristan, Serenity, right? Even like the footage, it's hilarious. The footage in the intros that they use in like all the seasons later on of like the characters putting on the dual discs and putting on a serious face. That Tristan face is actually when he's taken over by Nesbit, and Serenity and Taya are like when they're in the virtual world, right? Because otherwise those characters don't duel ever. So if you have those characters in Duel Links, you owe that to the virtual arc where they actually duel, and whatever cards they use and whatever they're known for, and even just the fact that they're duelists at all comes from the virtual arc. Or even those intros, the anime intros where it shows them, Tristan putting on a dual disc and the other characters putting on a dual disc. You owe that footage all to the virtual arc because otherwise, right, that wouldn't be something you even have. Or like if you were to condense the show down just to the actual moves, right, like instead of all the talking and exposition, it would be super short, right? Just simulate the game, like, oh, they play like 10 cards total and right, just waste a lot of time. Or there's like a moment where Yugi has the Buster Blader and he would have won because Slifer and Ron are in the graveyard if they count as dragons, even though they have dragon in the name, the Sky Dragon, the Winged Dragon of Ra. But somehow it doesn't count, I guess. But like they're divine beast. But and Ishizu kind of trolls Kaiba in that way because I mean it's obviously just incidental that she only has Obelisk, but she gives Kaiba, the guy who loves dragons so much, the one god card that isn't a dragon, right? You have 2 dragons out of 3 god cards, and he ends up with the one that's not a dragon. Maybe as to not be overkill, but that's another dumb name. Like, again, alligator sword, but also white magical hat. Wow, it must be like an equip spell, like a hat that somebody wears. No, that's what he's actually called. Right. White magical hat, Corrosive Dragon. These sound more like spell cards or equip cards or something totally different. So, right, again, whether it's lost in translation or they're just trying to be weird with the naming, I'm not sure. But yeah, Kaiba has some wild histrionics that are pretty funny if you look at how he's so dramatic about everything. Kaiba and Joey, whether you want to admit it or not, have very similar styles of play. Obviously, Joey goes for the luck thing, but like just in terms of the trying to have like strong monsters, a lot of monster cards. And again, all those oddly specific cards that constitute plot armor are very funny.